it's recording, but I can cut this out if need be. Is there anything that you don't want to talk about at all?
I'm pretty much an open book. I mean, I've pretty much shared my whole life and like all the divorce shit, and I'm very open about being enhanced. So,
Cool. That's kind of what I figured, but just want to make sure. All right. So, welcome, guys, to the Refined Strength podcast. I am joined by my lovely friend that I've known for a while, Alex Edwards.
hello. Thanks for having me.
Welcome. Yeah, thank you for coming on. So, I really wanted to have you on because you are just such a positive and impactful person, I think, to the people around you. And I've really watched you over the last few years just increase that so much. I knew you originally because you reached out for figure posing,
Hmm.
right? That's
Yes.
like when we first got connected.
Yeah.
And that, what year was that? That was a while ago.
That was in my 2021 season. So I
Yes.
competed in Emerald Cup and
Hmm.
I was very just like stiff. I probably could have done better like in the overall if I had like posed better. So I was competing in Empire like 2 weeks later and I was like, oh, I'd been watching you because you were local, and you were a pro. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm just going to hire her and I'm going to go in. And sure enough, I slayed, got the overall. It was awesome.
Yeah, I remember that show too because I think I was at it because I was attending like the strongman portion of that show, and I walked into the bodybuilding show as you were getting your overall.
No
Like
way.
it was
No way I
literally
didn't know
right
that.
there, and I was like, "Oh my God, that's my posing client. That's amazing!" And I was just like so excited for you. So yeah, lots has happened since then.
For both of us. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So tell me and the listeners just a little bit about who you are, what you've been doing. Just give your elevator speech.
Okay. Oh goodness. I don't know how to boil this down. Okay, so I was a power lifter for several years, and then in 2018, my wedding, and then 2 weeks later, nationals. So I prioritized the wedding, kind of fell out of powerlifting, did the whole shredding for the wedding thing. And then at the beginning of 2019, my now ex-husband was like, let's try bodybuilding. I've always wanted to do a show. So I was like, say less, I need a goal. So I found a coach, like we did our first show. It was rough. I was not ready. Um, did another season in 2021 after things kind of settled after the pandemic and everything. Um, and then did my first pro qualifier at the end of 2022. And then June of 2023, filed for divorce. Um, and that's when things kind of really went haywire. At this point, kind of in this transition phase, as I'm like getting out of this marriage, I'm also working on getting out of my like 9 to 5 routine.
And what
Because
was your 9 to 5 routine at the time?
I was a network administrator in public K-12 education. So I was a little IT tech girly.
Yeah.
Um, and it was cool. It was good. Like it's what I went to school for, but social media was taking off. Like my passion has always been in fitness. And so like I leveraged that and took the opportunity to step into fitness full time because we had also owned a gym together. So I was working
Right.
full time, owning and operating the gym, pursuing bodybuilding, like all of this stuff, so much
And were
stuff.
you coaching at that time too?
I have been very quietly coaching a handful of people for several years, just kind of like for free, helping friends out, coaching some powerlifting, stuff like that. But had never didn't have the time really to turn it into like another revenue stream or like another job. I just
Time
didn't have the
thing.
time
Yeah.
for it. Yeah. So I took my experience and education and knowledge and leveraged social media income to leave my full-time job, got a divorce. Everything in my life changed last year through the last like 6 months of last year. Um, and yeah, so at the beginning of this year, I started a prep. Well, I'm not solo. I do have a boyfriend, but for the first time in my adult life, I'm like living alone. I can pour so much like into myself and my clients, and yeah, that's
Damn, that's awesome. There's so many little pockets of that I want to explore. So I love the thing about how you know you went to a national show, right? While you were still married and you were in that prep. That was in 2022, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So what about that year? I feel like that year is obviously the year before this big like catalyst type of a year, 2023. What about your life and what was going on in your life at that time made you realize that there was something missing or something wrong?
Oh my gosh. So literally so much. So I was working full time, a 40-minute one-way commute, parenting full time, owning and operating the gym, trying to keep like the marriage was already sort of failing, so trying to pour into that. Trying to get the business, like not understanding what's wrong with the business, not realizing what horrible reputation my ex had created locally. So
How
just
did
trying
that
to
not get realized? Or like how do you feel like it wasn't realized for you?
so I knew that he was like flirting with other women. I did not know the depths of the infidelity. Like nobody
Damn.
clued me in, nobody came and talked to me. So here I am like working, parenting, managing the home, like all of this
You're
stuff.
taking care of all the shit so he doesn't have to and he has time to go fuck off and fuck around, right?
Yeah, that's exactly what happened. So post divorce, obviously, like people came out of the woodwork and they're telling me all this shit, and I'm like,
Isn't
am I
that
allowed to
interesting?
curse on this? Sorry.
Huh? Oh yeah, yeah. Trust me,
Okay,
you can.
great, great. Yeah, so people are coming out of the woodwork. They're like admitting all of this shit to me, and I'm just like, oh my God. Here I am, like I've been the breadwinner. I've been like managing this business so he can pursue his dream of being a gym owner, and this is what he does. Okay, okay.
Yeah,
So yeah, I was just like burnt out. I was toasted because I was also like full-time content creating, like
yeah.
leveraging.
And that was
Uh,
when things were kind of blowing up for you too, right?
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. So it was just like I had my hand in so many pies and I was so distracted that like I was super burnt out. So at the beginning of 2023, it was just like this like major come down, like scourge, like the brakes got put on everything. Like
yeah.
suddenly now I'm 100% self-employed. Like I need to figure out what my day to day looks like because it had been so structured and routined um, out of necessity that, yeah, I just kind of had to like crash and burn for a second.
What did that crash and burn look like? Like, how did you recognize, oh my God, I'm crashing and burning, and like, what do I need to, like, how did you figure out how you start building back up?
So like I'm a big systems and routines girly. So I had to
Yeah,
like really take a step back and like because it was getting to the point where I would just like wake up and grab my laptop in bed with a cup of coffee and just start working on client work.
yeah.
Um, and I was just like in bed and then it would be like 10:30, 11 o'clock. I'm still sitting there in my pajamas, like, what am I doing with my day? So I was like, all right, let's start with a morning routine. Let's just start there. Um, and then I kind of like started rebuilding because at this point I've also got post show blues going on. It was a really long prep in 2023, so I've got a little bit of post show
For
blues.
22, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Yeah, I prepped from May all the way to December.
Yeah, that's a long time.
Yeah, yeah. So there was like some post show blues. Hormones are out of whack because I'd pushed enhancements really hard that season too.
And that was
Um,
your first season with enhancements, right?
So
Or
I
first prep
had
season?
enhanced through the growing season, took a health phase, and then enhanced through the prep
Right.
again. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Um, so yeah, I just started taking a look at like the systems and routines and started like building these little a morning routine. Now let's do a night routine. Now let's get the eating schedule figured out. Like instead of just waiting till you're hungry, let's get back on a schedule here. And so I just started adding structure back into my day.
Just like little by little, not all at once. Do you feel like
Yeah.
that helped more so than if you were to try to just do everything at once?
Oh, for sure. And I'm sure you relate, but that's the same approach I take with my clients. Like try to
Yeah,
overhaul everything all at once and it's not
you're gonna fail.
sustainable.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Especially when you're in a place of that like crashing and burning, you still, I think, I had this too. My dogs are coming in here right now. Um, hold on. had this too where I see this a lot in my own clients is when we're in like a really low spot, we tend to like have a lot of self-doubt about like our abilities to come out of it. Like, well, you failed at this before, like, what happens if this goes this way or if this goes that way? And I think that can be a big part of why we fail at doing everything all at once and that overhaul cuz like you need the overhaul to literally survive, but you also need to like understand your limitations just as a human because we're
Yeah.
not equipped to handle like everything that we are pushing ourselves and being pushed to handle, especially with the fact that just social media and all of the connections that we have and all of the things we have to think about at once, all like especially as bodybuilders. I feel like me and Austin talk about this a lot, like way back in the day when people were first coaching online, you literally just sent like your pictures and weight, right?
Yeah.
And got like a little tweak to your diet and some cardio, and that was it. And now, like, I feel like I know you have a coach that gets a lot of data, right, from you every
Yes.
week. I do too,
Yeah.
and I take that from my clients. So, like, there's just so much more to bodybuilding now, and there's also a lot more to just everyday life. So, it's like it can feel really overwhelming.
Yeah. Well, and that was a tremendous change too, because I got a new coach in, it was literally 2 weeks before I filed for divorce. I
Oh,
got a new
wow.
coach. He took us both on because he was like, I really prefer to have both parties of a married couple. And then 2 weeks later, I was like, by the way, coach.
Is that your current coach now, David?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So does he still coach your ex?
I have no idea. I don't care.
Yeah. Just curious. That's interesting. Well, so tell me how like your approach to like your bodybuilding journey has changed over the course of like coming out of that relationship, coming into your own as a single solo person, and now and into now.
I think, well, like I said, I really relied heavily on the structure of my schedule. And I didn't know that until my
You
schedule
didn't have that
became
structure
so
anymore.
loose. Yeah.
Yeah.
So one of the biggest lessons, like every prep comes with like a lesson and like a personal growth type thing. And the for me this one has been about being very mindful and present. Um because I'm somebody that gets a lot of food noise. And so for me I have to like really bring myself down and make sure that I'm being very like present and mindful and aware, and it's been like such a peaceful journey this time.
Tell me more about the food noise. Like, what does that actually feel like for you?
um so for me a lot of times it's like, well, nobody's looking, I could just take 32 grams of nut butter instead of 16, or if the blueberry doesn't hit the scale then it doesn't count. And so
Yeah.
it's just like as I'm prepping my food I get all of this noise because I struggle with impulse control anyway when it comes to
Hmm.
shopping, going on a trip, like anything. And so that's really, when I get hungry, it's obviously like the body's mechanism for survival, like, hey, you should eat more.
Yeah.
um and so like practicing that self-discipline of like, well, the integrity is what I'm doing when nobody's watching, and there's literally nobody watching unless I turn the camera on.
Yeah.
So for me it's very much like a self-fulfilling like integrity thing, that I know that I'm doing the right things even when nobody's looking.
Do you think that what you just said, like that integrity thing and the food noise and like that nobody's looking mentality increased in intensity because of the fact that you have so much of your life online with YouTube and TikTok and Instagram and stuff?
That's a good question. I have to admit that social media makes me feel more pressure to be perfect. Um, I don't always necessarily feel like I can show up as an imperfect human who makes mistakes. Um, and that's true not just with food, but with training philosophies, with methodologies, mindset things.
Content.
Sometimes I feel like I
Yeah.
can't show up and recant a previous statement because I have to commit with what I've would have said.
Has there been anything that you can think of right now that is like that? That something you may have said like last year or a couple years ago that Alex now is like, oh God, I'm so embarrassed about that, or like wish
Um,
you hadn't said it or need to recant it or anything like that.
Nothing that I think I feel super embarrassed about. Um, One thing, and this is so silly, but I've started weighing out like my whey isolate, which I've
Mm,
never done before because for me that always like kind of treaded towards disordered territory. Like I
yeah,
have to be very mindful of that. And this season it's been no big deal. So I've been weighing that out and I've made a ton of videos about that, about how I don't do that and like it's a bad place for me mentally. And then this season I'm like weighing everything.
why do you feel like you needed to make that shift into a little bit more precision?
Um, so my like tagline for this prep has been this one's for me because this is
Yeah,
like because it has been for me. It's been personal growth,
no,
it's
but
been
yeah,
time,
yeah,
all of that. And so like being super accurate and super precise, I feel like is directly linked to that. For some reason,
yeah,
I can't necessarily explain that connection. But it's just been a habit that I've picked up and it hasn't treaded into disorder territory, which tells me, right, the goal is always progression. So that tells me that like
yeah.
mentally I've made a good amount of progress.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it means too that you're like, I think when people are scared of like, oh, is this a disorder or is this disordered behavior? They're kind of like bringing that on to themselves in a big way. And this isn't the same for everybody, but I definitely think it comes into play when someone is like afraid of something happening. Like, what if I can't follow my diet? What if I can't get lean enough? What if I can't, make this work with my partner? Whatever it is that someone is fearing, that's kind of like, it's almost like they're manifesting it.
Yeah.
Because just like that, it's cheesy, but what the mind believes, the body kind of achieves a lot of the time. And like it's because if we can't stop thinking about it, then there's that level of self-sabotage, or self-sabotage just kind of comes in to almost give us a sense of control that we obviously fear that we don't have, but self-sabotage gives us control, that like basically control over our own failure, because we
Yes.
think if I can't do it, then I'm going to make sure I can't do it, not like accidentally not be able to do it, or not be able to do it because I'm just like don't have the genetics or don't have the ability or something like that.
Yeah. Well, and those mindset shifts are so like simple too. Like
Yeah.
what instead of saying what if I can't or like performing that self-fulfilling prophecy, just start saying what if I can? What if I do?
Yeah.
I will.
That's been a big one for me in the last couple years, is that just like, what if I can? Like, this could really be it. Like, this could really work for me if I actually just fucking believed in myself. Because if I look back on all the times that I failed or couldn't do something, I can also look back on all of like the moments preceding those failures and realize like, well, I wasn't fully in. I wasn't really believing myself, or I was giving myself reasons to not believe in myself,
Yes.
you know? And I think I found that a lot in my like just the difference between living and bodybuilding and working as a coach and stuff like that, like when I was married and then I got divorced in 2020. I filed for divorce end of 2020, fully officially divorced in 2021. And I hadn't dealt with like the infidelity thing, but it was definitely an abusive situation and just toxic in general. And I realized how much I was leaving of myself just somewhere. Like it wasn't
Yeah.
present. I wasn't present with myself. And I realized that was because I had just let someone control the narrative so much with just everything that I was doing. Um, and that kind of, because I know more about your story now, my question is, what do you think you've, like, of the person that you were before you knew the things you know now? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like with, because you're a really strong person, like just in general, you've always exemplified that even before all of this happened, like before your divorce, everything like that. So something I get asked a lot is like just when people are asking me about how I left and why I left and things like that, is like, you're so strong, you're so confident, you're so like great in so many ways. Like, how did you let that happen? Or how could you let that go on? You know, how could you be manipulated? So
Yeah.
what do you feel like is your answer for that?
Um, I think a lot of it is just naivete.
Hmm.
Um, because I got into that relationship when I was 23, 24. I was pretty young.
How old are you
And
now?
I'm 33 now.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, and I just didn't know any better. And I didn't know that it was happening as it happened.
Yeah.
Because that's the thing about, and this is not my words, my therapist is the one that said this, but that's the thing about living with a narcissist is that things start, they're great and then they just degrade over time.
Yeah.
And so I didn't realize how much my light was being dimmed and how um just crushed I was under the weight of like all the trouble that was at home, not just the
Mhm.
infidelity, but all the other stuff that comes with
Yeah.
narcissistic abuse. Um, and so it happened slowly and surely, and I didn't know that it was happening, and I look back on those past versions of me with so much love because I know that she was doing the best she could with the information she had available.
Yeah.
Um, and now I know better and things are better and that's
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, the looking back, and I've talked to other people about this too, just the feeling of like not even recognizing that past version of yourself in some ways, like the further you get away from it and the more into yourself or like more deeper the relationship with yourself you become or you deepen, the just like the farther that seems like that version of you seems, and you kind of like forget how you even got there. But I think you're right, it's just like when you're in your early 20s as a female, just like, or even as a male, like you just don't know. And when you are dealing with someone who's lived, like you've lived your whole life, like trying to be an honest, good, kind, loving person, right? And someone who is a narcissist, like officially,
Yeah.
they have lived most of their lives as the opposite, and so that means they've had a lot of practice being that way and hiding behind a mask of like being able to manipulate people into thinking that they're a lot better. And I think a big part of that is because and the research that I've done on narcissists, and like narcissistic personality disorder is that it usually comes from some kind of like childhood trauma or abuse, like growing up, like parents were also that way, so they raised their kids to be that way, and just the
Yeah.
cycle kind of continues. um, and so that's why people like you or me or other people in these kinds of situations end up in something like this, and often end up in multiple things like this over and over again. Like they can't break the cycle because it's almost like there you get addicted to what you get from that type of person.
Well, and it
Which,
becomes like comfortable and familiar. This pattern
yeah.
of like abuse, it's like, oh, okay, I know what to do here. I don't know
Hmm.
what to do when I'm free and happy. This is
Yeah.
unusual.
Yeah, I mean, you almost get a feeling of like, wow, life is so good. Like, what if something goes really bad? Like,
Yeah.
I went through like a moment when I was buying my house last year where I kept waiting for someone to tell me no, that I couldn't do this. And like I was buying this house all by myself, my own money, my from coaching, mostly, and I just kept thinking like this can't be real. Like I can't do this. Someone's gonna like find out that I'm not really who I think I am.
They're gonna expose me.
Yeah, somebody's gonna expose me, and just like then with every milestone, and like you're pre-approved, you're clear to close, you're closed, you have the house, here are the keys, you start realizing like, wow, what the fuck was I thinking? Like, yeah, I do deserve this. And we get really conditioned from being in that type of environment that we can't and we can't and we don't deserve things, and like you only deserve that. And that's what I remember being told a lot of. It's just like, you'll never have that because you're not good enough, or you're not, you're not good enough at this or that, and you need to more time or more of this, or you need to be better or something like that. So it's cool seeing people figure that out and like flip the script, and now you're like, no, I can do every fucking thing that I want.
Yes, the world is my oyster,
Yeah, exactly.
for sure.
So tell me about your like this prep and just like the this one's for me, that mentality. Like, what are you hoping and focusing on gaining out of this journey right now?
I mean, the goal is, of course, to get a pro card and then work on becoming a good pro. But like for me, bodybuilding's never just been about like getting the trophies or the end goal. It's about being better than last time. And so that's where like the precision with
Hmm.
food comes in for me. And just doing little things like beating my time on the or beating my like calories on the elliptical. Pushing to maintain strength, making sure that I'm not just checking boxes every day, but that I'm doing it with like passion and
Quality.
intensity and excitement.
Yeah.
And it's like it really has been for me. I've kept a lot more of this prep private and off social media than I have any prep really, because I've just been like leaning into the process, leaning into the discomfort, and just spending a lot of time being, yes, present and mindful, but also like doing self-reflection and doing gratitude and recognizing the privilege that I have, because like the privilege of,
Bodybuilding is a privilege. Yeah.
for sure it is. But it's especially a privilege when you get to dictate your own schedule. If you're tired, you can sleep in an extra hour. I can go to the gym at the most opportune time for meal timing and how busy it is. Like all of these things are not things that I've been able to do in past preps. And so to
Hmm.
me, it's almost like I don't want to waste this opportunity to have like a perfect prep when I've done so much more with so much less.
Yeah, I definitely feel that. That's a great point. I think this is probably my first prep that I've had that be the case for the entirety of the prep. Because my last prep, I was in I was in the process of quitting my full time job. Like I quit it 3 months in, became a full time coach right as that was happening. Like it was overlapped, and then I moved across the country. I was in a relationship that wasn't great. Like a lot of things that shouldn't be happening during a prep. Um, and obviously, and it was a failed prep too. So like, go figure. So that's been kind of how I've looked at my own prep this year too. Is just like I have all the tools that I need to be 100 times better. And even if
Yeah.
it doesn't end in the placing that I want or like the exact look that I hope to have, it's still going to be better because I am a better person. I'm better at doing things. I have a better environment with me, and just like everything is better. So I might as well like use that instead of
Yes.
just like, waste it. So
Yes.
with your with the thing stuff about being present and just self-reflection and all of that, what do you feel like that is directly giving you in terms of like how it's helping you progress better as a person but also as a bodybuilder?
I think that it's for me, what I've noticed the most is that it's been a stress relief.
Mm.
I tend to be pretty like high strung and anxious, and so for me, it really kind of like pulls that back down, so that I can do things with intention and bring that passion and intensity that I intend to that I want to bring to each task, whether it's preparing a meal or going to work out or whatever.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
What do you, when you say like I'm a pretty high strung anxious person, do you feel like, how do you feel like that has changed over the course of your journey? And is it fair of you to still identify as that? even because of all of this work that you're doing right now?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think that I think that the I almost think that it becomes habitual, right? Because it's more comfortable for me to be high strung and stressed out and anxious and create all of these like scheduling demands and stuff because like we were talking about earlier, that's what's comfortable and familiar.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, that's been a change for sure. Can you repeat the question for me? I got
Yeah. Um,
rolled away.
no, you're good. So, do you think it's fair of you to call yourself, I'm an anxious and high stress, high strung person, when at the same time you're saying, this prep, I've done so much better at like self reflection, slowing down, being present, journaling, gratitude? Because those things are things that I'm sure you know, like, are not common with really high stress, anxious people. Like, usually it's pretty hard for those people to do that.
Yeah, I Ooh, that's such a good question. I feel like I'm in the transition phase right now. I'm
Yeah.
transitioning away from being a high-strung, anxious person and into a more grounded person. Because I definitely still have the like it's a default mode for me.
Hmm.
So I'm like working on breaking out of that being my default. So I'm
Yeah.
in the transition, I would say.
That's a good answer. And I think like it's important to recognize that transition too as like a necessary transition. It's not like you're leaving behind like any piece of you that's negative. It's not like being anxious is bad or high strung or structured, but it's taking all of the good things about that version of you, the structure, the like time management, that like organization, all of that, like taking all of that stuff and flipping it to be like productive enough so that you can actually have that presence and have that intention and have like really good quality stuff without all of the anxiety and without as
Yeah.
much of the anxiety and like just the high, just the waves and like the tension that comes with being that type of person.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I definitely what used to define myself as not anxious but more high strung or type A. And it's funny because most people that have met me in the last like couple years don't think of me that way. And so, like Austin, for example, he'd like, I think he said one time, it's like, I would never describe you as type A at all. I'm like, that's just because you didn't know me back when I was an executive assistant and I was like in a crazy, just high stress environment everywhere I went. Because when you're in a high stress environment, I think you have to kind of be a high stress, high anxiety person. And that's probably what you're seeing too, is just like as you get closer to just being in control of your environment, like with your schedule, being flexible with it, having a loving, caring partner, boyfriend, whatever, and like being more in charge of your prep instead of having to be in charge of someone else's whole ass life as
Yeah.
well as your own. Like,
Yeah.
you don't need that part of you. You don't need that anxiety.
It's always so interesting to hear other people's outside perspective of who we are when it so directly challenges our interpretation of who we are.
Yeah.
I went and visited my coach in Atlanta a couple weeks ago, and we were podcasting, and he goes, "You are just such a disciplined person," and I was like, "I'm what? Are you
Yeah.
sure?"
Yeah.
Because I don't think of myself as disciplined, and some of that's probably just like all of the noise up here because the
And just
actions of
memories of your past too. Memories of fuck ups or like times you've cheated on your diet, you know?
yes. Yeah, if
Yeah.
I hadn't, my first prep was so ugly. And so part of
Mm.
me still identifies with that. I binge every weekend and then I do extra cardio to make up for it. Because
Hmm.
that's the entirety of my first prep. And so a part of me as a bodybuilder still like identifies with that version of me, even though here I am weighing out
Long
my way
gone.
isolate, you know?
Yeah. What do you feel like you've gotten out of your relationship with your coach, David, that has improved you as an athlete? If you're like the first thing that comes to mind.
Oh my gosh. There's There's actually a lot. So he really specializes in functional health, and so I like spent the last half of last year like strictly focusing on health. So I did a pretty gnarly gut protocol after doing some GI mapping. I got my IUD removed and really just focused on the health piece. And I think that it shows in my physique, it shows in my skin. Like I've always had problematic skin even before enhancements. It shows in my mental health. Like it, like truly everything about me
It's
is better.
amazing what taking care of things like that do and like just the circle of it all. Like one thing
Yes.
leads to another and leads back to the other thing.
Yeah, it's also deeply interconnected that it's been really nice to have a holistic approach
Mhm.
to not just how am I going to look on stage, but also how am I doing literally everywhere else all of the time.
Yeah. Well, and how am I going to look after I get off stage? Because a lot of people just don't think about that until they have to. Like they don't think about that until like, oh, it's the week before my show and like I'm going to nail my reverse, guys, and they don't. So because they were never really thinking about it prior to the prep. And I see a lot of athletes who want to just, they do a consult with me and they want to start prep right away. And there's very few people that can actually handle that. And I'm sure do you coach prep clients?
I do. And I'm almost never willing to dump somebody into even a calorie deficit, let alone a
No.
prep.
Yeah, it's just almost never a good idea. I would have to like have a really good like conversation with a person to know like that they're ready for that. Usually the people that I bring on like that are people I've tried to almost convince not to work with me because I'm like I really don't like this, and then they have to give me all of the evidence that they have that tell me it might be a good idea. But
Yeah, show
um
me you've got the habit, show me you've got the mindset, show me that
exactly.
you're eating enough to begin with. You can't come to me eating 1,800 calories and say, I want to lose 20 pounds.
No, girl, it's not gonna happen.
Yeah.
Um, what was I asking? Um, the the just like the thoughts before starting a prep as just like the longevity of your prep and of yourself as a bodybuilder. I think so much of the time we don't, or people don't think about how they're gonna look after bodybuilding, or they say like I want to do wellness, and they're a bikini competitor really, and they don't think about like both divisions are great, but they don't think about the fact that like, well, you might want to look like a wellness girl on stage, but do you want to look like a wellness girl in the off season? Because that's way different than a bikini girl in the off season, especially if
Yeah.
you say you want to get a pro card or you want to be competitive. And so having that holistic approach to the health side of things really, it makes you dig into like it makes you lean into the discomfort of an off season a lot longer, right? Because gut protocols and functional health or hormonal phases take a long ass time usually,
Yeah.
and you're not really growing during that point for the most part, and most people don't. Um, so you have to think about like, how much do I really want this? But it has to be about more than wanting the bodybuilding goal. It has to be about wanting the life goals, the life gains, and like life after bodybuilding, and thinking about that. And I truly think that people are better bodybuilders if they're thinking about that stuff, and it means that they compete less and they're not as they don't compete as often. Maybe they don't do as many shows or whatever. Maybe they don't even get as many like first place wins as pros, but at least they have a life and at least they have their health, right?
Yes. Yes.
How
I'm
have
a
you
big fan of,
seen?
go
Sorry,
ahead.
what? No,
Oh, I
you
was
go
just
ahead.
going to say, I'm a big fan of long off seasons. I don't think I've ever taken shorter than 18 months off.
Yeah. What about how do you feel like is your way that you stay focused during that time? And it's probably been like since you've always done that, it's might be harder to answer because you're like, I just do it. But like a lot of people can't, right? So
Yeah.
what's your advice to people struggling with the thought of like an 18 to 24-month off season?
Well, I think it's twofold for me. One is that I truly enjoy training. even if I wasn't powerlifting or bodybuilding, I would still be training in some capacity. I love to
Hmm.
move my body. I love to exert myself. So it helps that I enjoy what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Um, the other key for me, I think, is that I still create a narrative. Like there's always got to be a narrative. So if I know that I'm going to have, say, in an 18-month off season, we'll call it 12 months of like real growing, right?
Mhm.
So to me, I'm like, okay, that's only 52 leg days. I've got to make the most of
Mm.
every single one. So I still create like these timelines for myself. And then I also like to logbook in the off season. I don't logbook in season as much. But during the
Yeah, because it
improvement season,
sucks.
yeah.
Usually.
Yeah, I don't want to see what's happening in the
Towards
water.
the second half of prep, that logbook doesn't look great.
No, she would be ugly right now. She would be
Yeah.
really sad. But I like to, just push for a little bit of progression. I'll record my sets. Can I make it a little bit tighter, a little bit cleaner? Can I add a pause at the bottom? You know what I mean? Like little stuff like that just to keep the narrative.
Yeah. Well, and like counting all of those little things that you just mentioned, like a little bit better form or a little bit lower in squat or just like those tiny things, like as bigger wins than you're thinking they are.
Yeah.
I think the people that get bored of a training program or bored in their off season because they just start doing the same thing all every week are usually the people that like are not giving those things enough credit. They
Yeah.
are not seeing the value in that progression of like getting deeper in a squat, getting one more rep than last week. Because you can think of it as like it's only one more rep, but that's like that could be 200 more pounds that you lifted once. And if you count the total volume of your whole of everything you did for that one exercise that week, that could be hundreds of pounds that you added to your volume. So that's a lot. That's a big win. And think about if you keep doing that over time, you're adding hundreds and hundreds of pounds, thousands of pounds over time that you're creating volume from. And then and as a bodybuilder, obviously, like, we don't care as much about like specifics with like what we're lifting and how many reps and things like that, like powerlifting or something like that would be, but it's still important enough that because it leads to progression. If you're progressing in the gym and you're not missing meals and you're taking care of your health, you're probably growing. And that's the goal of the off season for majority of people is to grow.
Yes. The other thing, since you mentioned powerlifting, I usually
Yeah.
pick a pet project.
Okay.
So like one year, I really wanted to get a 4-plate deadlift. So I got my 4-plate deadlift. This
Mhm.
last improvement season, I really wanted a 225 bench. So I was barbell bench pressing, trying to get that bench. Is that the best for hypertrophy? No. Did it keep me excited and motivated to train though? Yes. Yes, it
Yeah.
did.
Yeah, I think that's things like that are overthought a lot. Like the word optimal gets thrown around a lot when we're talking about exercise selection or form or little things like that. But going back to what you said about how you stay focused in your off season, it's like I really like training and I really enjoy it and I like pushing myself. And so if you're someone who's listening to this and you're a bodybuilder or you're a competitor or maybe you haven't competed yet and you want to, like, ask yourself first, like, how much do you really love training? Because that's the most important part of bodybuilding is the action that you do to actually build your body. People like to say that food is most important, but it's really not when it comes to like how do we actually build? Like, yes, food is there, it's important, but it supports the training, it supports the fat loss, it supports everything that you're doing, your actions. And that like little bit of progression that you can make if you can have fun with it, that's what really matters. So if you're enjoying fucking bench press, then do bench press. Just don't hurt yourself.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I think I saw a Reddit thread the other day where someone was asking about, like, I know a lot of bikini girls don't train chest at all. Should I be training chest? Should I not be training chest? Should I be worried if I'm training too much chest? And there's just so many dumb opinions on it. And, like, I just want to say to people, like, you can train things that you want to train, and like don't let like one little arbitrary rule that someone scares you with a really engaging reel that tell you that you shouldn't be doing, right? There's so much information out there, and if you're progressing and if you're fitting the criteria that you want to fit, then why does it matter if you're bench pressing when no other bikini competitor is bench pressing,
Yeah,
right?
well, and I think too, especially in bikini, they see these top pros that have kind of maxed out the division for themselves
Yes.
and no longer have to train with such intensity. When at the amateur level, I can almost guarantee you don't have enough muscle yet. So
Oh yeah.
keep
I've
training hard.
seen so many people, especially in the bikini division, even like just they sandbag their training and they're not training at all, and then they keep going back to nationals year after year because they gained like half a pound of muscle, and they're scared of gaining more weight, and they're training like Jandori or Daraja, or they're training like these people in the tops of the ranks because those people can't get too big. Like they're at that point where they should not get too big. But like if you just started competing or you just started bikini, like you're not going to accidentally get too big by training harder. It's just not going to happen. And if it does, great.
Definitely.
It's a lot easier to like atrophy a little bit or like pose a little differently to like hide your capped shoulders or your quads or something like that, and still fit the division even though you might be a little too big.
Yes. Yes.
So that brings me to my question about your division. Are you doing figure and physique this year, or focusing on one?
I haven't gotten very clear. So I've done WPD in two shows, a regional show and then the Olympia Amateur in 2023, and never got very clear feedback about which division I fit best. So I'm gonna just keep going. I really, really, really love WPD. I go out there and I get my front double bicep going and I just feel at home.
Yeah.
I just don't know if I'm willing to do what it takes to have longevity in the division.
Mhm.
And I don't know if I'm willing to make some of those sacrifices to be like successful long term.
Tell me about the sacrifices that you're like apprehensive about.
I think that in order to get big enough and lean enough for WPD, you have to push PEDs a little bit harder than I think I'm willing to go.
Yeah. So my question, because like I hear a lot of people say that, and I'm the same way. Like there's a certain level that I don't want to go past either. It's there's not like it's not actually specific. It's mostly just like I'll know when I get there. I think, um, like I'll know when this is too far, or when it's getting there. But with women's physique, if you what if you get there with less than you think you need to get there? Do you think you'll keep going?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So, what do you think is like, do you think that thought process is like, I don't know if I have what it takes. I don't know if I'm willing to do that. Do you think that that might, at any level, be holding you back from pushing more, even within the safe boundaries that you have?
Well, this is where having a coach is really important. I
Yeah.
just let him tell me what to do and I report data back to him about how I'm feeling, like what side effects I'm experiencing, if any, and let him make those decisions.
Has there ever been like a time where you've reported something, or maybe you don't see something that's an issue, but he's called it out and wanted to pull back?
Not yet, no, actually. The compounds that we're pushing this season, I seem to tolerate really, really well. Side note, you should get your compounds tested, and I have. Um, and so, I feel good about what's happening and I feel okay. And like you said, I'm sure that once I get to that boundary, that's kind of when I'll be like, okay, we've gone too far.
Yeah, I think that's a really good thing to think about when it comes to enhanced bodybuilding, where like you it's not like there's a one size fits all approach, and there's not one way of doing things. There's so many different ways of doing things, and I think coming from someone like you did quite a bit of your bodybuilding career so far naturally, right? Like you only started enhancements the off season before your last prep, but you've been competing since 2019, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was
Um,
like, 2.5, 3 years deep. And also I think that I get a lot, maybe you're the same way, but I get a semi decent amount of people who come to me and they're like, I would like to enhance. And I'm like, okay, great. How long have you been training? 2 or 3 years? Keep pushing, player.
yeah.
You gotta earn your right to enhancement. So, I had
Yeah.
almost a decade of training under my belt, hard and heavy, structured, managing nutrition before I decided to take the leap.
Isn't it interesting how people like come to someone like you've essentially done it in like you've done it right. There's no right or wrong way, but you've done it in a way like you really took the time to give yourself a lot of like just genetic potential or like reach that genetic potential and then play with the natural or the enhanced potential, right? And people who have only been doing it like a year or less sometimes just think that that's the only thing that you need to look like you or to like get like that.
Yeah.
Isn't it crazy? I
Well, and
don't
I
know.
think too that goes back to, do you actually enjoy what you're doing, or is this some kind of like external validation thing or something that you feel pressured to do in some capacity?
Yeah.
Um,
And who's pressuring you too? I think that's an important question to ask yourself. If you feel like a pull towards something like drugs in bodybuilding as an athlete or like bodybuilding in general, like if you feel a pull towards competing, but you never really thought about it until someone at the gym said like, "Oh my God, you should compete."
yeah.
Like if you never thought about doing it until people started asking you about it, is it something you really want to do? Or are you just doing it because you think other people think you should do it and you think you're going to get something out of that? Because, newsflash, you're not going to get much out of bodybuilding if you're not doing it for you.
Yes.
And that goes back to like, I think your narrative of like, I'm doing this one for me, not doing it for a partner or Instagram or, you know, money or anything like that. The people that think that bodybuilding will make them money just outright are just lost. Like,
Yeah.
good luck.
Yeah. No,
Because,
bodybuilding's expensive. This is a
yeah,
very expensive hobby.
even as a pro, there's so many expenses that come with bodybuilding, especially as a pro, like with like yeah, you don't pay for show fees. Cool. So you're saving a $500 a year or something like that, if even. And like if you were doing a couple shows, but that's it. You're still paying for a lot and you're only going to get sponsors based on your social media following and or if you're placing really high at pro shows, but you're not going to place really high at pro shows without spending a lot of money on all the things you need to be successful,
Yep.
like food, a quality suit, a quality coach. Coaches are expensive. It's and people kind of like gawk at pricing and they look for people with different pricing and things like that, and it's like if someone wants to work with someone like David, I know he's at a lot of times like had a wait list or he's priced himself high enough that like because he doesn't want new clients, right? And I know like I have time periods where I've had the same thing where like I don't want more clients just to say I have more clients. I
Yeah.
want a quality client, and I also don't want someone who's not going to be serious. And if you're not willing to pay more than $150 a month or $200 a month, then you're probably not serious about it.
Yeah. Well, and I think too that when people expect such low pricing, you're devaluing my education, my
Hmm.
experience, my track record, and my time, quite
Yeah,
frankly.
exactly. So, how has your coaching career like changed over the last year? Because you said you started out, you were doing much more just like kind of side hustle style for free for friends. How has it like? How have you grown it over the time?
So I have to admit that social media has been instrumental in that for me, because that's where literally all of my clients have come from. I
Yeah.
have a couple local clients, and when we owned the gym, I had like two PT clients. PT has never been like my bread and butter. I don't love it.
It's not a
Um,
great trade for time.
no, no, it's really not. Um, but so I kind of started with this roster and it was a little bit disorganized. And so over time, I think the organization, I'm a spreadsheet girly. I love
Yeah.
Google Sheets. So I've developed this like meal plan and like client checkers and like, track their progress every week. So it's been a constant learning game for sure. Just finding new ways to organize and track and
Hmm.
um, my favorite part though is the communication piece. I love, love, love working with girls on mindset, how we're looking at food, being
Mm,
excited to train, finding ways to track those progress markers like we were talking about earlier. Like, let's develop a narrative for you. Let's find something that you're excited about, especially these girlies that want to do wellness. And I'm like, you've got 2 years of growing
yeah,
minimum.
if even.
Minimum. So let's develop a narrative here to keep it exciting because 3 hard and heavy leg days a week, that's
Yeah,
rough.
it is. It's like it's not for the weak at all. What are some of your goals as a non-athlete, like outside of bodybuilding?
Um, so I would like to continue growing my coaching business. I think that I would like to expand and bring on one or two more people um, in the semi near future, kind of post prep. I also would like to move. I'm ready to sell my house and move to a more metropolitan area. Yeah.
She's
Yeah.
moving out of the Pacific Northwest.
I know it's crazy. I don't see myself staying out of Washington forever, but
Yeah. So you've lived in Washington your whole life, right?
yeah. Aside from a
Or-
couple of brief like forays, I lived in Texas for like 4 months. I lived in Idaho for like 2 months, but I always came back to Washington.
Yeah.
So,
What do you know, like, do you have ideas of places you want to move to?
okay, here's what I need. I need Uberable access to an airport. I need it to be dog friendly, and I want a Trader Joe's. I don't have a Trader Joe's here.
Oh, you don't have a Trader Joe's?
No. The closest one is in Issaquah.
Damn. Yeah,
Yeah.
no, you don't
Yeah.
want to go to Issaquah.
No, I do not.
No,
Uh,
it sucks going there. Because it
so I
sucks
kind of
being out.
So I looked at San Diego for a little bit because one of my best friends lives there. I looked at Vegas pretty seriously, and my boyfriend and I are talking about Arizona. So those are kind of like the main places I have in
Not
mind.
Dallas?
No,
All the
I don't.
bodybuilders are moving to Dallas.
I know. I just driving there is so sketchy. Like, why do you have a freeway with another freeway on the side with like other roads? Like, what is happening?
Think about it this way: you get to go on a roller coaster every day, and you don't have to pay for it. You just drive, and you're on the roller coaster, and like, are you getting off like in the sky, or are you getting off down there? Like, that's what it's like. It's pretty cool if you think about it that way. Are you still with Buff Chick, right? Aren't
Hmm.
they based kind of in this area?
Fort Worth, yeah.
Fort
Mhm.
Worth, yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So has that ever been a thought, like because of that, or
Yes, and because I know that it's like Texas is pretty like business friendly.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah,
so,
it is.
so I've considered it. I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, Arizona is really cool. When I moved to Texas, I definitely thought about Arizona, Vegas, Texas, and Florida. Those were like my top areas that I was thinking about. And I don't know. I had visited all of them pretty much, and Dallas just kind of like called to me. So I think like there's a lot of value in just going to the place in with like through the eyes of like I might live here. Could I see myself here? And that's something that you can do with just like anything in your life. Like could I see myself being a bodybuilder and training for wellness, legs 3-4 times a week every single week for 3 years? And you have to just really like can I see myself there?
Yes.
So,
Yes.
yeah.
Well, sounds like I have a couple flights to book.
Yeah, girl, let me know. We can do an in-person podcast and like put a chair right there, get a workout in.
Oh my God, how fun
So,
would that be?
yes.
Okay. All
Yeah.
right, maybe Dallas is on the list now.
Yeah, do it. Well, thank you so much for being on. I'm really excited to share. I could totally just keep talking about all of this stuff for a while, but I know you got things to do. So thank you so much for being on. Everyone like and subscribe. Follow Alex, Just Another Fit Chick on Instagram. And then are you just Alex Edwards on YouTube?
It's just another fit chick everywhere.
Okay. Awesome. Cool.
Yep.
Well, I'll have it on the show notes. Thank you so much. I'll see
Thank
you guys in the
you.